Peace. My name is Teray Allah. This is the Knowledge Yourself radio show on location. We're here off of Crenshaw Boulevard in the city of Los Angeles. And if you notice over my shoulder, we're near an abandoned site. It's basically a work in progress. But if you look a few miles, so to speak, a mile or so away from where we are now, you can see one of the most prominent churches in Los Angeles. Just for sake of, video and all the legalities, I'll leave the church nameless. But while it was under construction, this particular church cost millions of dollars, and it also raised the eyebrows of the community in terms of why a church would invest so much money in making a building. So one of the questions that we're raising on Sunday's show is that, is the church providing more to the community? Across the street from the church, you'll see buildings that are for lease, kind of like flea market sort of situations. There doesn't appear to be a lot of building going on next to, a building of that size or of that prominence in the community. So the question that we really want you to ask yourself is, the church and organized religion, is it benefiting what would be considered low-income areas? Are people benefiting from its presence? We're going to continue to do follow-up for the sake of this show and try to find out what sort of community programs are open to the people that live in this area who may not want to become church members. So is the church as an entity, is it serving not only its members, but is it serving members of our community? So this is Teray Allah from the Knowledge Yourself radio show. I'm going to say peace.
Peace, it's Jabul Allah right here, and I just wanted to add on to the point that Teray was making as it relates to the church on this side, as well as this is actually an abandoned grocery store. So I thought it was interesting that you have a grocery store next to a church. The church is spotless, but the grocery store obviously is abandoned and shut down. So my point is that, is what's being taught in the church more important than the food to nourish our bodies? Now, when we look at this church, when we look at this grocery store, it's not like in the area there's a vast number of grocery stores, so much so that this one had too much competition and had to shut down. That's not the case here. They just took the grocery store out of the community. Just like I said, this church is still standing. You can see it shining and glistening. So, I thought that point was interesting. And, like I said, this is Jabul saying peace.
Peace. Welcome to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jackal inshallah.
Peace, Jabul Allah.
And we're happy to be with you again on this day of September the 15th, 2013. It's the Knowledge Power Day. And today our topic is titled, How Does Religion Bloodsuck the Community? Of course, each show is brought to you by Global Position Solutions. You can also hit us up on www.knowledgeyourselfradio.weebly.com if you would like to make comments, have questions, or you would just like to add on to what we're doing. So I wanted to pass over this portion of the show to our brother Jakil Knowledge Allah because he has a commemoration. And I just want to say that it's very important that people out there understand that If there's anything we want to teach you, it's the idea of what it means to truly be a loving individual and being. And we have quite a few people supporting this effort, and quite a few people who have, in so many ways, given us encouragement and motivation. And Jaquil is going to share one of those people who has been a continuing source of inspiration to us. Jaquil?
Indeed, peace. So I would like to say on the 10th of this month, my teacher, Pendeka Paul the Taurus, passed away and returned to the essence. So I'd like to dedicate the show to him. He was a great individual in the sense that, I've never seen a man so powerful be so humble. I would definitely say he, if anything, is an example of someone who'd be a 5% without actually being a part of the 5%, that degree talks about, it's a quality degree. So, to him, his family, and all the students, all the brothers in the art, I'd like to say peace. And the show is dedicated to Pentecost.
Peace. Thank you very much, Jaquil.
I wanted to add on,
Please.
I never actually physically met, his teacher, but I could tell based on how, this brother carries himself that he was definitely a prominent individual, one of the things that I learned when my grandfather passed was how many people he touched. That's how I think you can really determine how great a person is by how many people they actually reached out to and touched. So, based on how this brother carries himself, I could definitely see that he was a prominent individual.
True indeed. Well
Thank
said.
No
And
question.
I think it's important that, as always, we continue with this effort to share what we've learned from so many different teachers that we have in life. So I want to say peace to your teacher and to all of the students at the school. And I know that you all will carry on the legacy. It's positive. Well, let's begin with the quote. It's by Napoleon Bonaparte, the short guy from France. He said, "Religion is what keeps the poor from murdering the rich." Let's pass that around a little bit. How does everybody see that?
Wow.
Well, for me, it's pretty simple. Religion is a pacifier. As people, go about their day, religion kind of keeps you distracted from actually looking at your condition and saying, like, damn, this is crazy. How come, my boss lives on that high hill? He has the big car, but I'm working more hours than him, and I have to take the bus to work.
Right.
It keeps you from thinking that way. It just keeps you thinking that if I pray or if I bang my head against the floor enough, I'll reach that big house in one of these days. So,
Right. Or you get your reward at the end for dying, right? And you get heaven
right
at the end, and everything is going to be, you'll have what he has in heaven.
Right.
Right.
But you won't have it now, but you get it when you die.
Right.
So you're going to work hard now for nothing, so that when you die, you get everything that he has now.
Right.
Right. So that's basically one of the things that we're going to talk about today in reference to organized religion and the community. So why don't we get into our current events for today, beginning with Jerul.
Yeah, peace.
Peace.
So, I actually just came across a situation that you went down in North Carolina. A man by the name of Jonathan Farrell was actually murdered by the police. It turns out that he got in a car accident, a pretty serious car accident, and he was actually looking for help. So he was knocking on this lady's door to try to get some help, maybe use her phone to make a phone call. She called the police. So when the police came, he ran to the police, asking the police for help. And first, one police officer pulled out his stun gun and shot it at him, but missed. So then the other police officer pulled out his gun and shot him multiple times and killed him.
Mm.
That's tragic.
Right. It's tragic. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, people look at certain individuals crazy because they think that the police are, you know, really in the community to help the people out. But first and foremost, you know, we must be mindful that we're a lot of times we're looked at guilty until proven innocent. So, you know, we have to think a little bit deeper when we approach the police. You know, I don't like to say always be on guard, but it's almost one of those type of situations in my eyes. You know.
Yeah,
Right,
for sure.
and you know, again, we've mentioned the love-hate relationship. I guess it depends on who you're talking to. Let's just say we've mentioned the relationship between original people and all people, for that matter, in regards to the police. And the one thing that we should always remember is that the police are trained professionals, and they're trained to react a certain way to each situation. So in this situation that he just mentioned, you know, I would question, you know, first of all, were the two officers sober? Because when you have two people on the scene and neither one of those people can establish that a person is actually in need, you know, they can't measure a person's anxiety level.
I
We gotta
mean,
question
I'm not
the
a genius.
professionalism.
I'm just
right.
wondering keywords like, "Hey, help!
Right.
I need help."
Right.
That might be an indicator that the person
Right.
needs some help. I mean, I'm just throw that out there.
Right. So you know, you just have to wonder about people's motives.
So
I
where
mean,
did this happen again, Colin?
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be making any visits there anytime soon. But
Well, you know, the science is that this happens every day all over the country.
Exactly.
You know, so
It's not unique,
yeah,
unfortunately.
right. You know, so like I said, we just all have to be conscious of our surroundings and, you know, conscious of the people that we interact with, because, you know, things like this could happen instantly. So
wow.
you know.
Thank you for sharing that. Brother Jakil had us some other news as well.
Oh man! So I've got Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. He implies that a failure to strike Syria will mean a nuclear strike in the U.S. More importantly, in South Carolina. So initially, my first question was, how do you know that?
Right.
Right? Who told you that information? Who are you talking to where you can make that kind of implication?
Right.
Yeah, so that'd be my first question. Of course, no one asked that kind of question.
Right.
Which is probably why I won't be allowed at meetings like that too. They show, nah, you can't show up.
Right.
You ask intelligent questions. But yeah, so, you know, as we know though, Obama and the government administration decided to ultimately stand down for a time being as they work on some chemical exchange. Basically, we're taking their chemical weapons from them, which he and Russia both said that he doesn't have chemical weapons like that and he would never use those weapons. But so as those kind of talks go down, we've kind of stand down for a moment. But although we're still in position to strike, so it's still a tense situation. But, you know, when you have statements like this, you know, you got to wonder, are they going to stage some kind of small false flag attack or something like that to get it? Because no one is really wanting to go on with the war. And I think, so, you know, they try to spin it, oh, okay, I'm going to step down. But you had no one's support in the first place to really proceed forward with it. So you were kind of in a position where you had to stand down. But again, if something happens, and you know they say, "Oh, look, Syria did it," now we're off to war again.
Right. I mean, that's typical of just the last, I don't know, 50 or 60 years in terms of
Unfortunately,
you know,
right?
the military and their involvement in the world. It's always interesting to me that the amount of intel that's out there, and then that's sort of streamed through the news to the people. It always seems like two different things, and you know, it just reminds me of the fact that many of the people that are in state government, or they're in some way holding a position in a world governorship, Many of them just really have no sense of humanity, and they're running countries and they're making all these decisions, which are altering everybody's lives as well as the environment. And I just wonder what, and again, we're talking about organized religion today. I wonder what their list of morals consist of, you know what I mean, or if they even have any, with all of these decisions being made. So,
well, yeah, they have more oil for us.
Right.
That's the morals right there.
We're gonna check that out. That's the English Chi lesson right there. So go ahead and manipulate the language and take out of it what you know is actually there. Did you have another one, or did you wanna?
Oh, we can pass along, but just a little bit more on that. He says it'll come in the belly of a ship on the Charleston, either the New York harbor or a port in South Carolina.
That's very detailed.
Yeah. One of two locations.
Right.
I mean, two possible locations to which this possible attack could happen and how it's going to happen. A lot of information, buddy.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. If anything, you should be locked up maybe in a Guantanamo and interrogated as a potential terrorist who knows some information that could harm America. We'll just throw that out there.
Right. So we go back to, saying that you know something, right? But you're kind of hiding the truth because you want to keep or maintain a sense of fear in people that are actually listening to your message. It's a really tricky scene right there. We think it's going to happen, but we're not really going to tell you everything. So it's pretty interesting how they're operating these days. I had a current event that I found on CNN.com, an event to where a young boy had died in Louisiana due to a brain amoeba that was found in him. So basically, the boy was swimming in a nearby, I want to say it was a lake.
Okay.
And apparently, this amoeba was quite, I don't know, rampant in that particular body of water that the boy was swimming in. So, of course, there are a lot of symptoms associated with it, such as headache, flu-like symptoms when you get this particular type of brain amoeba. But unfortunately, it wasn't diagnosed soon enough, so the boy died as a result of it. Right now, what they're doing in Louisiana is they're treating all of the, these swimmable waters with chlorine.
Okay.
Right, to kill the amoeba. One of the things they said, and this was just a word of advice, especially to those of you who are living in areas where, swimming in certain bodies of water is a common practice. They said that you should use a nose plug because this particular amoeba enters the body through the nose.
Okay.
And again, they're stepping up their efforts to treat all these different areas with chlorine. So you just want something to look for.
That's going to be interesting as far as treating it with an unnatural substance. As far as
what's it going to do to the fish?
Well, right, yeah. And then
algae, things like that.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking that deep. Okay. I was looking at it. We know that things have a collective intelligence, and so where you may be able to kill one area with chlorine, what about when it begins to adapt? And in a different area, you can't kill it with chlorine, so would you add more chlorine? And then, like you said, fish and other life will happen when you start pouring chlorine into waters, and fish has to drink it, and grass and all that stuff.
Right. It'd be interesting. I didn't see in the report where they said this particular amoeba originates from, or how it breeds, or
that was my question.
What is it?
How to get there?
More from, right? So when these types of things come up, you can't really say there are any freaks in nature. Usually, nature is tampered with, and then these freaks are created.
Right.
So. That's definitely something to look out for.
Indeed. That's my story.
You had another one, God?
Oh yeah. So in the show we did way back, we talked about RFD chips being placed. So I've got this story that comes from Fox News, and there's this artist, Anthony. I'm not going to butcher his last name. But in any event, he's a tattoo artist, and so he had a RFID chip inside it, put into the middle of his hand in this area, that was the size of a grain of salt. And for this particular application, when you placed a cell phone over the hand that was compatible with that chip, it would display a picture of his art on your phone. Yeah, pretty nifty as far as displaying art, but we ultimately know what the end result of that technology is.
Yeah, they're trying to soften people's perspective on it.
Yeah. There was an article a couple years ago where this lady in the Midwest somewhere was so happy that she had a chip placed in her hand. She was like, "Oh, it makes shopping so much easier."
Right.
She tried to sell it on that approach. She goes, "I don't have to bring my wallet. I come and I do with my hand, and everything is good."
Wow.
Yeah, everything's not good, but
Wow. I mean, again, if you're a religious fundamentalist, whether you agree with us today or not in terms of the information we're going to share, it's always good just to be a watchdog, so to speak, in your organization about these types of things and how they're going to affect our society and the world at large.
Right.
We rage against enslavement in any corner of the world. So thank you for that, God. Let's get into today's questions for the show. To begin with, number one, if churches are there to serve the community, why are so many communities poor? Number two, why are buildings, grocery stores closing down left and right while churches continue to thrive? Number three, do churches provide the community with anything of value? Number four, does college, this is an interesting question, parallel church? Think about that one. Number five, how many Christians are here in the United States and abroad? And finally, what is the connection between liquor stores and churches? So we're going to take a brief break, and we're going to come back and get heavy into today's show. And we'd like to thank you all for joining us. Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Najallah.
Peace, Jarulala.
And before we left, we hit you with a few current events. And just to remind you, our topic for today is about organized religion. and how religion is being used to bloodsuck the community. So we wanted to begin with our first discussion, which is the history of organized religion. And we have a couple of what we would consider prominent denominations and or organizations today that we feel are directly in some way exploiting the community. So to begin this discussion, it's really important to remember that as men, those of us who are speaking to you now, we're all men. One of the things we advocate is that each person, in order to become a better person, needs to acquire knowledge of themselves. So anytime we seek to learn something about ourselves outside of ourself, generally you find yourself in an organized religion. If that is not your direction in life, we would encourage you to study up a little bit more in terms of who you are and your purpose in life and everything else related to that. So I think one of the organizations that we're all familiar with, unless you live somewhere in a predominantly, I don't know, single denomination society, like if you live in Utah, it's probably not that common, but we're all familiar with the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. I know that on any given weekend, I could be sitting in my house doing whatever I'm doing, and I hear a knock on the door. And, you know, if I'm in the house with someone, we look at each other, and at that point we have to decide, are we going to open up the door? Now, not to say anything bad or mean against Jehovah's Witnesses. That is one of the things that they do on a regular basis. They go door to door and talk to people about the coming of God. So we're going to talk briefly about the Jehovah's Witnesses and how, you know, what our take is in terms of their force in the world in terms of trying to improve the community at large and the world in general. So I wanted to kind of pass this over to Jerul to kick off the discussion about the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, so you know, from my studies, it was started by an individual by the name of Charles Taze Russell. He was born in Pittsburgh in 1852.
Go Steelers.
Right. You know, he worked as a harbor dasher. What's that? You know what that is?
Harbor Dasher.
Harbor dasher.
No, not gonna touch that one.
Okay. You know, basically was raised as a congressionalist. So one thing that stood out to me in regards to him was that you know, he was trying to convert an atheist to Christianity, and in turn he was actually brought more into the atheist way of thinking.
Wow.
But they considered it agnosticism. You know what I mean? So that, and then he was just influenced by various other different groups like the Adventists. So, you know, from my research, he basically took pieces of different ways of life and then created, you know, the Kingdom Hall or Jehovah's Witnesses. So, you know, I know you wanted to add on.
Well, I think if you go into the study of the Tract Society and you begin to trace back the different founders or at least the people who were involved in the early inception of the Jehovah's Witnesses, one of the things you're going to find is you're going to find at least one person in that particular lineage who was a full functioning Mason. And I know many of you out there, you're all into Masonic rites and you're into studying about Masonry. But the one thing that I wanted to sort of drive home is that regardless of what religion or whatever organized religion you're a part of, one of the most important things to do is to study the origin of where that particular faith or religion came from. Many of you are not even aware that some of the ministers or the people you're seeing, such as in the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, are actually involved in some other practice, which quite frankly is a demoralizing approach to getting followers. Now, when we talk about money and we talk about history, you have to ask yourself, how much does your organized religion profit you? One of the things about the Jehovah's Witnesses is that they do employ the people in their organization. One of the groups of people that they employ is called special publishers, and these are the people that are given a salary for producing the Kingdom Halls of Jehovah's Witnesses publication. And right now the name escapes me. I mean, I probably have it somewhere in my car. Thank you. The Watchtower, brother.
Yes.
So the proceeds from that are supposed to lead to a salary. Now, the Jehovah's Witnesses have not been what I would consider under any type of watch. However, you can't just access information and see exactly how much money they're generating and exactly how much of that money is given to the larger community. And I've noticed also that it has attracted quite a few so-called Latinos to their organization. I mean, it's pretty heavy in my area. Like in the early days, man, it just used to be people of African descent coming to my door and talking to me about Jehovah's Witnesses when I was a teenager in Los Angeles. But now it's like I'm seeing so many people, so many Latinos that are Jehovah's Witnesses now. So for the most part, we have to ask ourselves, and I want to kind of generate this discussion.
Okay.
I mean, are the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses as an organization, are they benefiting what will be considered poor communities?
Well, you know, for me, I would say emphatically no. And the reason being is, you know, anything that you deal with is not dealing with rationality and truth that can actually benefit you today, then you should probably leave it alone. You know, one example was that Russell was, you know, he taught his followers that Jesus was supposed to return in 1914. You know,
What?
in 1914, right? But he didn't come, right? So that's a clear lie to your followers, and then now you have to backtrack and backpedal and say that no, well, it was a mistake. He's gonna come back later on. So it's like, first and foremost, you shouldn't be a teacher shouldn't be teaching you to be a follower. He should teach you to eventually be a teacher yourself.
Right.
If he wants to keep you as a follower, it's clear that he's trying to get rich off you. Let's be honest.
Yeah, especially in I'm gonna say man-man relationships. I'm gonna say you might have some latent homosexual tendencies that they need to address.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you should teach a man how to be a man, and making him a follower is not teaching him to be a man.
Right.
And so what is your purpose for teaching that man to be other than his own self?
Right. And there's another thing, just to add on to what you mentioned about the coming of Jesus. I know that at some point he then told his followers that it was going to be this date. I think there were like 2 or 3 other dates over the course of his life that he said, Jesus would return.
He gets busy.
Right.
So much to do. It's got to be everywhere. Right? I mean, that's hard. Right. You're going to miss a spot here and there.
One of the things is that as far as the Jehovah's Witnesses are concerned, as far as the harmful nature of it, I really would like to impart this message upon all of you who are in organized religions, that we, advocate making a visible change in the community. And it only takes a small group of people to do that. That's when some of us have to set aside the fact that we're Jehovah's Witnesses or we're Baptists or anything of that nature, and really try to come together with a whole group of people and look at what's really preventing not only society from improving, but also the world at large. I think one of the positive things that I can say about Jehovah's Witnesses is that they are being a little bit more involved in gang intervention.
Okay.
So I think that may be one of the reasons why it's beginning to be widespread among the Latino population.
That makes sense.
But it appears, because now race comes into it, is it just being limited to gang interventions geared towards Latinos, or is it something that's being geared towards all cultures for that matter? And that would be another thing we could question. So you'll have to make the decision, about what you truly want to follow. And again, we advocate that you not follow anything. Why don't we go into the next boiling point here, which is the Church of Latter-day Saints.
Before we move on, there's another interesting point I just came across. Later on, another teaching by an individual who took over the ranks by the name of last name of Noor. He taught that Adam was created in 4026 BC, right? And that human beings have been allotted 6,000 years of existence until Armageddon.
Interesting.
So, based on that teaching, that's another lie that didn't come into fruition. So, yeah, I just thought that was really
right. In the Bible that I have at home, the story of Genesis happened somewhere around, 4,500 years or so before Christ.
Right.
So it's interesting when you look at these things, when we know that the original man and woman have been here for trillions of years. So if you're really involved in these types of things, you have to ask yourself, man, first of all, exactly how long have men and women been on the planet Earth? And how is it now that you're relying on some book or some minister to tell you otherwise? I mean, scientifically speaking, it just doesn't make any sense. Right. It just doesn't. The interesting thing was when I was coming up, I went to a Lutheran school, and the first time that I was introduced to the Mormons, the people at my school, because we had something called chapel, which was where we went in every Friday and we got brainwashed and reminded why we should be good Lutherans. But it was what it was. The first time I heard about Mormons and the Church of Latter-day Saints, I was told that it was a cult. And as time went on, and quite frankly, we were shown a video, and I think one of the first things that really bothered me about the Mormon Church was when they said that, the devil was black. So, I mean, I think after that point, I had made the decision that being a Mormon was not for me. So, and I still attest to that fact, despite that Eldridge Cleaver became a Mormon. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion right there.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, that wasn't always the case in Mormonism. And my little handheld device is tripping out on me right now. I had some notes up, but yeah, there was when it initially begun. I guess it was okay for black people to be a part of it, and there was a certain point in its history where they went on that whole black people are evil, Satan's black thing. I don't know if it's a time issue. You spend enough time in hell burning like that, maybe you get darker. Is that the? Right. I don't know if that's the theology behind that. Being funny. In any event, so that wasn't always the case. And then there was a point in time after that where they stopped that, and then they allowed black people to join Mormonism, but you can only go up to a certain rank within it.
Isn't that interesting that they have ranks in a religious organization?
I want to say they have some interesting ties to Masonry. So people out there, go ahead and investigate that.
It's interesting. One of the things that I know that we were talking about is the founder of the Mormon Church, or the Church of Latter-day Saints, was John Smith. So I just kind of wanted to get everybody's take on what's meant by latter day. So what exactly is supposed to be the latter day? Is that a specific date or time to be a saint?
Yeah, in the latter day.
Okay.
No, basically, from what I understand, and I wish I would have bought my little Book of Mormon. It's got my name embroidered on it. Gold letters are cool. It's a good feeling. But so the Latter-day Saints basically comes from, so after Jesus died and was resurrected, according to them. It's not what I'm preaching. He came back 3 days later. He walked amongst his people, and then he left. Right. Well, and then the Bible stops there, and it continues on with its story and its people.
Mm-hmm.
So the Latter Day Saints in the Book of Mormon comes into play because Jesus really didn't go back into heaven. For you Christians, I don't know if y'all knew that. According to the Mormons, he came to Middle East and Americas to teach the Indians and those people about himself and God.
Okay.
So I guess that's the Latter Day Saints, is all those people who came later than
right.
those others.
Wow. Okay. So now, in terms of the tablets, I know there were supposedly in the story, John Smith apparently found some tablets at some point.
iPads or were they?
Nah, he didn't buy into the hype. He did,
that was in the Apple. He was more on the Android side.
Okay. So, if you let a Mormon tell it, I remember my cousin would say, let you tell it, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you let a Mormon tell the story, Joseph Smith was living in the outskirts of New York, in the wilderness by choice. Not because he was banished for being a liar and a known snake oil salesman and causing trouble amongst the original people, and they kicked him out. That's not why he was living in the wilderness.
Oh, that's not why.
That's not why. It's because he chose to on his own accord.
Okay.
And then after choosing to go out into the wilderness and live that harsh life on his own accord, he found these tablets. The same person who was a snake salesman, oil,
and this was in America.
Yeah.
Right, he found these tablets in America.
And he brings them back and says, "This is the word of God that was brought over here later than, and I am now the head of this great thing, and let's do it."
Wow.
And now you have Mormonism. Yeah, and then, he had some practices which weren't too popular. The biggest one that people know about is having multiple wives. Right? So he himself was rumored to have 27 wives, which I wonder how that worked out. We do a show like that.
That's a later show, no doubt.
It's a big bet. In any event, so they kicked him out of New York. They kicked him out of a couple places. He eventually went to jail, in which case a mob broke in and killed him and his friend. His wife then went back, I want to say, to Pennsylvania, and started the more original church, and then there was another offshoot of Mormonism, which is probably what we see today.
Interesting take on that. And if I could say that, as far as checkered paths go, that's a really good example.
Right.
I think most of us, we always, the first thing that comes to mind when we think about Mormons is Utah. And I haven't quite established exactly why there are so many Mormons in Utah. I mean, I've heard a couple of different things. One would be that would be considered more or less a holy land or a holy place for Mormons, which is why there's such a large population there. Have you heard anything?
I think it's more holy because to a certain point, Utah allowed you to have multiple wives.
Wow. Okay, thank you. I didn't know that. Okay.
And I don't think they do that now, and consequently there are certain laws inside of Mormonism that now teach other than having multiple wives. So that might have something to do why it's the Holy Land. I would find it pretty holy if I could roll over there and have a bunch of wives and everyone was tripping. Yeah, it's just a spot. They kicked me out of New York and all these other places. This place let me do it, man. It's holy. Don't mess with this.
So we have polygamy as being something that's prominent in quite a few of these so-called religious organizations. Whether it's published or not, it always comes out. So thank you for that, God. Peace. I know we were going to talk a little bit about the Church of Scientology, and you all saw the brief, was the video stream? Okay. Yeah. So you saw a little bit about how Scientology is now making a visible presence in the community. So when we're talking about Scientology, I mean, there's been a swirl of controversy about Scientology. Yes, sir.
Before we go there, I wanted to add on as relates to the Church of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
One little thing that I came across in my studies was the U.S. government actually confiscated a lot of Latter-day Saints property under some act known as the Edmunds-Tucker Act in 1887. And the part of that was interesting to me is that within 9 years, okay, so they seized about $2.3 million worth of property.
Wow.
So within 9 years, based on the 10% income that people were supposed to give to the church, they were able to make back that $2.3 million and more. And this is in 1887.
Wow.
So you could see what kind of money that these organizations make.
Since we're going there, I'll throw this in. Mormons used to, I don't know if they still do, I know at one point in time they owned Blockbuster and also Lucky's, I want to say, or was it Albertsons? It's probably Lucky's. One of those two stores. Check it out. But at a point in time, for instance, at Blockbuster, and I think to this day, you still can't get Electric Boogaloo there because breakdancing is considered evil and from the devil. Yeah, check that out. And then as far as the grocery store chain went, they didn't used to sell alcohol there. And once they realized the amount of money they were losing out on alcohol, the obvious choice was to hold true to your religion and not sell alcohol.
Right.
That's stupid. We sold alcohol there, and we made all the money back. So when you talk about them being able to make a lot of money, a lot of these churches have different endeavors in which they can also
and
get some money into.
Yeah, a little more in those proceedings basically talks about tithes being paid and fast offerings, and these are contributed by the church members. And then it's funneled back to Salt Lake City. You know what I mean? So you could obviously see, that's kind of like that sounds like a real hustle to me.
Right. and I was going to ask you, like, what are the implications? I mean, do we have to pay to make it into a better phase of life in this respect? Heaven? Is that the message that we're getting from these organizations?
I can't speak exactly for the Church of Latter-day Saints. I think they use the same scripture that a lot of churches use, and I can't quite pull it off the top of my head. Somewhere in Titus, where it talks about you should give a tenth of. I'll look that one up. Yeah, it talks about giving a tenth in tithe, and so they always tend to use that one as far as giving money, and that's to help spread God's word. Which I always wondered, we're talking about a being that created everything and doesn't need anything from you. Why do you need money to go create something for you?
Right.
Why wouldn't it just provide that for you? Without using the backs of the people who are in bad areas. I mean, as you saw in the video, right? There's a Ralph's big superstore that's closed down, so that's a lot of people who had jobs all the way down from your baggers to your people who are working in the meat department, flour department, all those people. What are they doing now for work? Right. Meanwhile, you've got that church that how many thousands of people? I'm sure the numbers are higher, but let's just say a cool 20,000 people go and they have church every Sunday, and everyone gives $1. That's a lot of money at the end of the year. That's tax free. Right. Now we know that everyone gets more than $1. I've been to Benny Hinn services where people he passed the collection plate around multiple times, and every time it came to me, there was a lot of paper in there.
And like I said, some of my students from the projects, love y'all. They've already said when they go to church, they come up. That's when I come up.
Right.
So I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that our youth interpret religion and tithes a little bit differently. If they see themselves as struggling in life. Well, their feeling is like, God doesn't want me to be hungry and poor, so I'm just going to take a little bit for myself and take that home. And that was their logic behind
What is Supreme understood he said? take all the money that you have, right, and throw it in the air, and then everything that stays up there belongs to God, and everything that falls back to the ground, that's yours. You get to pick it up and put it in your pocket.
That's true indeed.
Right.
Piece of supreme.
One other thing I came across as far as assets go, Time Magazine in 1996 reported that the Church of Latter-day Saints, their assets exceeded over $30 billion.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
$30 billion, man.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I would like to invite the members of the Church of Latter-day Saints to my high school because we're in dire need of resources, and we would also advocate that quite a few schools in our area need resources, which we're not going to get from the state or the federal government. So just kind of sending that out there as an invitation. Wow, thank you for that, man.
Yes, sir.
I want to talk a little bit about the Church of Scientology now, and I know this religion has really, I should say, just in recent years, it's picked up its momentum because of some of the celebrities that are involved in it. If I'm not mistaken, John Travolta being one of them, and there are a whole bunch of other people in
Tom Cruise,
in the entertainment realm who have taken to this Scientology. So, Drew, what is it that you think is attracting people to Scientology, and also could you give us a little bit about the origin of Scientology?
Well, I think what's attractive about it was based on what y'all just said, as far as the these individuals who are considered stars, adopting it as a way of life. It's gonna have a trickling down effect to people. They're gonna say, "Oh, well, he's doing it. I like him, so let me go check it out."
Right.
So I would think the individuals who put together the organization had a strategic plan in place. Like, if we go and get a couple actors behind it first, then it'll be easier to go up into certain communities, and get those people on board. So from my research, the individual who put it together is by the name of L. Ron Hubbard. He was basically sitting kind of like me and you, us three are sitting, and with a couple of his friends, and they were having a conversation, and one of his friends named Lester Del Rey actually half jokingly said, you should what you really ought to do. I'm paraphrasing, but what you really ought to do is create a religion, because you'd be tax exempt or you'd be tax free.
Right.
What I mean? So that started the wheel spinning in his head, and and led to what we see as Scientology in this day and time.
Right.
All I can remember is when I was coming up, Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah,
Dianetics.
all over the TV.
I mean, just, and for the life of me, when I would look at that commercial, I would say, is this like a new novel, or what is this? And here I am years later, realizing that was some form of religion being pumped up. Right. But, for those of you who are 80s babies, man, I know you remember those commercials. L. Ron Hubbard, Dianetics. Check out Dianetics.
Right.
So what's your take on Scientology in terms of its presence in the community? Because we did stream that video.
Yeah.
Is this something that's going to really help, for example, the people of Inglewood and other places where the Scientology church is propping up?
That's a good question. I would say within all these, religion does lie a little bit of something that is useful for the people.
Mm-hmm.
You got to swim through a bunch of BS to get to it, but there is within that something. And so, like Scientology, for instance, will try and attempt to teach you about certain simple words, like the word "the," and I have a theory that if you don't understand the small words in the sentence, then you'll never really understand the sentence. So they attempt to make people more literate. Now, to what means are they using that to is a whole other issue, right? But they at least attempt to give people some type of education. Now, the fact that you now have to charge people to move up in lessons.
Yeah, that was my point.
Right?
Yeah.
Which was, again, to get more knowledge,
man. You got to pay to play.
Right.
So, And you know, like you were talking about God, when they created Scientology, it was on kind of a bet that he couldn't get people to believe in space aliens and some other different ideologies.
It was
that they
initially it was introduced as a science.
Yeah.
Then they realized that okay, you know, people aren't really on a science tip like that. So where's people's minds at? Let's go this way with it. Yeah.
Wow. And you know, I know there's an old video out there that you can watch on YouTube where L. Ron Hubbard's son is actually at a court hearing in regards to not only his father's estate, but some legal implications about the Church of Scientology. And he basically presented that his father was not telling the truth and had not been telling the truth during the time he was alive. So which kind of creates a completely different understanding in terms of how that's benefiting people. So I think one of the things that we can point out is that anytime a religious organization has ranks of people in it, and you being the congregation or the majority of people giving the money to support these ranks of officers, that's when you got to begin to ask yourself, something is suspect. What's wrong here?
Well, I think you just said it right there. When you give money to support the ranks of officers, what's the deal behind that? And then how much influence do you have is it based on the amount of money that you give now, that you have influence on what gets done? So now are you promoting something like what Rome had, where I need to, you know, be a big time baller in order to get certain things to go my way with them, so now I can buy my religion? That's cool.
And you know, they're not giving people who are donating to a church, they don't give you receipts.
No.
There are a select few organizations out there that have dues books where every time you contribute money, they record that, you know, Sister so-and-so, she donated $5, you know, for today's chicken dinner. But for the most part, you know, religious organizations, they don't operate in that way. And we would even say mosques as well, because, yes, no one is immune, God. No doubt about that.
Yeah, and let's be honest, you know, Farrakhan and Scientology, they're in bed with each other right now, so let's keep that in mind, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing on its own, because I'm going to argue that Farrakhan's teacher, Elijah, would have never got down like that. So,
you know.
Booyah. So there you go. Why don't we go ahead and take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to you a little bit about Catholics, Lutherans, televangelists, and college. Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Najala.
Peace, Jawullah.
And before we left, we talked a little bit about the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, and the Church of Latter-day Saints, and how these organizations are being used as tools to exploit people who actually blindly follow these different religious doctrines. I know that Jarul, he wanted to add on a little bit more about Scientology, and I want to hand this over to him.
Yeah, I mean, I got a quote from actually, the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. This was from September 1955. And this basically sums up the show based on what he's saying. So it says, take it in cash advance. Guarantee nothing. Make sure you stress its spiritual slant and value. Steer clear of promising cures and don't rush them into auditing. Basically, auditing is when you sit down, it's kind of like a therapy type of thing. Don't rush them into auditing. They'll beg for it soon enough. Actually do this to be of service to man. Try to give it away. You'll find you can't. Don't use this just because it's a pre-clear getter. It's a lot more than that. It will put you in a financial condition and get your church going.
Unbelievable, man. There you go.
You know?
It's not unbelievable, but I'm saying that just because it's rhetoric. I mean, it's typical, man. So for those of you who just heard that quote, I mean, you have to ask yourself, are you asking enough questions? Are you sitting in a room with the minister or the reverend or the priest and getting down to the bottom of what that particular organization's purpose is? Or are you just waiting for Sunday to walk into whatever arena you're walking into to get your religious fix, and you're just digesting everything that's being said, you give your money, and you go back to being poor, or you go back to being uncivilized, or whatever it is you go back to doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really good point that Jarul just made. We do want to kind of take you back briefly about several hundred years and briefly talk to you about the Catholics and the Lutherans. And without really going into a really long historical discussion in terms of the origin of Catholicism and Lutheranism and things of that nature, we just want to talk about its presence in the modern world to begin with. And for you children out there, here would be a really good thing for you to do. I shouldn't say children because if you're not in high school, you're going to be like, what? Why would I read that? But there's a really interesting book. It's called The Canterbury Tales.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read that book symbolically, it's actually talking about the war that waged between Catholics and Protestants. And the character, the Red Cross Knight, who's going to try to slay the dragon, actually represents the Protestant church.
Okay.
And the Catholics are represented by the dragon that he's trying to kill. Because during the early days, when the Europeans were struggling to have one particular religion or institution represent all of the people in Europe, two of the most prominent forces during that time, among others, were the Protestants and the Catholics. And I mean, there are a lot of movies you can watch which talks about how, the Catholics were executing people, shortly after excommunicating them if they said anything other than, number one, Jesus Christ being the Son of God, and that would be the only way into heaven, but also the acknowledgement of the saints,
Mm-hmm.
which is where, many of the Protestants actually took issue with. But beyond that, if I remember correctly, the idea that the Pope was actually the representative of Jesus Christ on earth. And that was another thing that the Protestants really had issue with, is that, we can only make it into heaven if we acknowledge that this human being, who is the Pope, is the representative of Jesus Christ, even though he's advocating executing a bunch of people.
Right.
So I kind of wanted to let Jarul go ahead and build on everything related to the Protestant movement, the Lutherans and the Catholics, as you so choose.
Well, peace. Yeah, from the
Peace.
perspective of Martin Luther, it was an individual who, felt like the Roman Catholic Church was beginning to become too powerful, and really saw that they were exploiting people, from the sense of saying that, if you come to me being the priest or pastor, whatever you want to call it, um, and pay me, I will bless you so that you won't go to hell, basically. So this became a common practice during that time. This was in the 1500s, and so much so that the church got, fairly rich from it. So, Martin Luther was basically like, that's wrong. The Bible should be, what people utilize as their way of life, and it should have nothing to do with what another man says. And quite naturally, if you're taking money out of someone's pocket, they're going to beef with you. So, the Roman Catholic Church didn't like that. He got excommunicated. He, left, and he still continued to teach where he was at. And, obviously he was put under a lot of constraints and stress and things of that nature. So, yeah, that's basically how you get the Protestant as a sect, to the side of the Roman Catholic Church. So.
Right. His disagreements with them and their injustice.
Right.
I think a lot of the movements kind of, and that's why I said within all of these small, or they're not small, within all these religions, you can find some good things that you can take for yourself, but then they eventually get mixed, diluted, and tampered with, and then they begin to not be what they initially were.
Yeah, I mean that's common in anything. You think about it, like, if you know something and another person doesn't know it, you're in a place of power. So quite naturally, you're going to be, faced with a decision. Do I teach them what I know, or do I use what I know to get rich off of them? So
he lives and makes himself rich off the labor.
Exactly.
Right. And I think as the discussion continues, we're going to bring out a little bit more about how harmful these types of things are. And if you're let's say in your early 20s, we would encourage you to do a lot of research in terms of the origin of what you deal with. But sometimes people say, well, I don't want to know about that. I've just always known this, and this is all that I know. And if that's your take on things, well, it's perfectly all right. But for those of us who are really curious about our existence and our purpose in life, we will do the necessary research to help us understand more about ourselves and the world that we live in. Right. So I think we cannot even, leave this show without talking a little bit about televangelists and how they are a visible force on radio, television, which would include cable, the internet, and everywhere else that you can think of. So we wanted to briefly talk about the televangelists. And one of the things I wanted to bring up is that, we've been hearing about televangelists for like quite some time. Jim and Tammy Baker would be some that were the most notable televangelist celebrities.
Is that the older white gentleman, gray hair? He's always got the female cohorts next to him. Did he say something weird about like slapping women or something?
I
remember that one of those TBN dudes said something weird about like, yeah, he should beat the wall, something like that. I'm gonna look that up and post that for you. I remember it was a big thing about that. And
well, I mean, the list of scandals. I mean, sometimes when I look at when this information comes out, the scandals in regards to these televangelists, it reminds me of a soap opera. You know what I mean? Because you said a gentleman with his wife. I mean, there are so many of these televangelists who do these shows with their wives, and they pretty much just the same sort of archetype. A white man who's a little bit older, a white woman who's a little bit older, and the white woman is always shining, sitting next to her man, preaching this word, and she's advocating the same thing that he's advocating. So, just to get to the point, we want to refer you to a website which is called Ministry Watch Donor Alert, and actually, this is off of ministrywatch.com. So this particular website is set up to, keep people who are in these different organizations abreast of the amount of money that's being donated for what they would consider Christian causes or causes for humanity. However, what this website does is it basically will create a list. It compiles a list of these televangelists, organizations, and some other religious institutions about how much money that they earn. And when your organization winds up on this list called Donor Alert, that means that the IRS is basically in the process of persecuting that particular organization for not being transparent about their funding.
That's funny.
Isn't it? So
that's the crack dealer saying the dude in the corner should not be selling drugs.
So I think to begin with, one of the ones that we're all familiar with, the Trinity Broadcasting Network, is basically under fire for not being totally transparent about how much money they're making. And there's a whole list. There's like 30 donor alerts as of 2011. I'll just kind of read it because you mentioned the guy. Benny Hinn is on the list. You have Bible Prophecy Corner, the Boaz Foundation. You have Peter Popoff, if you've ever heard of him. I haven't. You have E-Bible Fellowship, T.D. Jakes Ministries, which is Potter's House of Dallas, the White Dove Fellowship. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And then I have all of these numbers. And I can pretty much just give you, I'm scrolling down, man. There's a whole bunch of information here. It's just so much information.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay,
no, but as you're looking through that, like I said, I was actually
at a Benny Hinn's thing just to check the different energies and stuff like that was happening. And, those dudes passed the collection plate around many times, within the course of a sermon. And I have sermons all day long, too, so I can only imagine the amount of money that they were generating and not collecting. Benny Hinn looked clean when he's on stage.
Right.
It's not a cheap suit.
No, it's not. I think one of the things that we need to add on about is the amount of money that some of these organizations are making. So I can refer you to a really interesting 2020 report that came out a couple of years ago, led by John Stossel, and it was talking about the truth or the lie behind some of these televangelists. And I'm right now the name or the partnership slips me right offhand, and I take a moment to think about it. I'll give it to you. But I know one particular organization has about $340 million.
Wow.
In terms of a financial foundation for their church. And the reason why the two people involved in this organization are coming under fire is because not only do they have two multi-million-dollar homes, but they also travel around in one of two jets.
Wow.
And John Stossel kind of brought that out on the 2020 special. And one of the people that came up as far as televangelists go was Reverend Price, who is a notable African-American minister. He's been on television for many, many years. Of course, 2020 had to come back and apologize to Reverend Price and his organization because what they said was that
Jesus needed them to have those jets. And who are you
How
to
else they gonna
speak
get
out
to heaven,
against
you know?
Jesus? Yeah, right.
Well, it was saying that he was implicated in the misuse of funds, but in actuality, it turned out that 2020 they didn't actually stream the whole quote or everything as far as what he said, so they had to go back and apologize. But, Reverend Price is one of those, as well as a lot of other televangelists that can claim millions of dollars in profits and earnings.
Right.
And when you look at their lifestyle behind the scenes, for example, what they were trying to say is that Reverend Price he owns 2 Bentleys. But what they criticized 2020 about was the fact that they did not say that those 2 Bentleys, they were gifts. And more than that, one of his homes was also a gift.
Okay, so this makes me think, right?
Go there, please.
So college football, right? These players can accept gifts, but a servant of the community can accept gifts of that magnitude. That's interesting.
And why is it
Gifts.
right? I mean, we're talking about Bentleys, which are priced at in thousands of dollars. Quite frankly, my brother to my right of me, he is a teacher, and he teaches energetics, among other things, martial arts. I teach in the public school system. The brother here teaches health and fitness. Quite frankly, I have yet to get a gift of that magnitude, a Bentley, for teaching Los Angeles, the children in Los Angeles. So
We got to teach lies, I guess.
I guess so.
Right.
So I should begin passing around the plate in my classroom. Hey, brothers and sisters, go ahead and give some money. This is going to God's cause. And we need to build a church, a house of God here at our high school. We all going to make it.
Which is going to require me a Bentley to drive to, because I just can't show up to God's church in a Toyota Yaris.
Sure, indeed. And you have to ask yourself, when you see someone that is on television regularly on a weekly basis, you begin to ask yourself, okay, how is this person that I'm watching and his philosophy and his whole existence in his church, how is that benefiting me as a member of that congregation?
Right.
And more importantly, when things get bad, can I go to this individual and say, hey, Reverend so-and-so, I'm having a bit of an issue keeping up on my rent this month. We don't really have that much food. Can you help me out?
Right.
Have that conversation. So,
I will say,
Yeah.
in some churches' defense, there are churches who will definitely shoot you a little extra
Sure
cash
do.
for rent or groceries and stuff like that. But with the amount of money that you're making,
Right. You think about it, you're making millions of dollars in the community. You shouldn't have, boarded up buildings next to you. You shouldn't have a grocery store that's obviously very important to the community, because that's the only grocery store within, miles and
Right.
miles, radius.
Right.
That shouldn't close down right next door. Like, these certain things shouldn't happen.
Well, that's the reason why he has a Bentley, right? Is so that he can pick people up from the house and drive them to the grocery store that's too far for them to walk to and carry groceries back themselves.
Pardon me.
No one's asking. That's what that is.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
They need to just ask, people. Ask and ye shall receive.
Right.
Sure indeed. So let's go into, because those are definitely some plus builds we can do, and I know we're going to revisit some of these ideas in terms of the exploitation of these different denominations or churches or what have you in the community. But I know that Jerul, he made a really interesting analogy when we were building the show about how is it that a college is the equivalent of one of these organizations that's exploiting the community.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to kick that off so we can build on that.
Yeah, definitely. Before I go into that, I just wanted to say that just because we didn't mention your said church or your religion in this show doesn't mean that you're not a part of this whole system. It's important to really do the knowledge to what you're involved in and look at how is this making me a better individual? How is this teaching me more about myself? And how is this helping my community?
Exactly.
But as far as college goes, you know, what was interesting to me when you look at the parallels between church and college, like, you know, you go to church and you're taught all these different things that are supposed to help you and, you know, make you a better person and you know, uh, promise you certain things in the hereafter, right? College is similar. You know, you're taught as a child that, you know, when you grow up, if you go to college, you get a good job, you get this, you'll get that. Um, you know, you get into college, you got individuals who are teaching you that are on a pedestal so much higher than yours that they almost feel like they're, you know, like a pastor or a priest. You know, so you know, you're giving this college all types of, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you're not guaranteed, you know, heaven in the hereafter
or salvation,
or salvation, right? So, you know, I think you know, those are some parallels. How do y'all see it? You know?
Well, I mean, I know that a month or two ago, an interesting news report came out about how the feds were going to change the interest on student loans, and I have to ask myself. I mean, the United States, they always, at least on some level, they advocate the importance of an education.
Right.
But as a nation, as far as people in government are concerned, they're not advocating it as a cultural responsibility or a national responsibility. And for the likes of me, I can't see why we have to pay for education. There are some people who are benefiting from that. I read this information about a football coach of all things at a notable UC system school that's making millions of dollars to coach a sport. And so that means the tuition and the money that's being used that comes from the sales of books, is going into the pockets of an athletic coach.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And again, there's no guarantee for salvation or that you're actually going to be better in life when you graduate from a university. One thing that's guaranteed is that, thank you. One thing that's guaranteed is that when you do buy that fancy car, right? It's not necessarily going to be based on your college degree. It's going to be based on how you apply what you know. Now, in saying that, since I'm making this point as it relates to college, when we advocate that people go to college, especially young people, we're not really teaching them how to survive the experience and come out with fewer debts. I mean, I know at my school I had to take it upon myself, and it's there. I'm sure it's there because we have great counselors. But to inform students who are in their senior year, and I had to direct them to fastweb.com to get an account so they could look for scholarships. And it's amazing how many of them, they have like 3.3 GPAs, 3.4, 3.5 and up, and they haven't begun filling out scholarships.
Where did you tell them to go to get that?
Fastweb.com.
What was that?
Fastweb.com. FASTWEB.com.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, there are so many unclaimed scholarships out there, and I told them, I said, during that time, I said, it's August, and you haven't received your admission letters, but why aren't you filling out applications for scholarships yet?
Right.
So I just think that college and universities, private universities, and one day, soon, we're going to tell you all who built those universities that you so glorify. Harvard being one of them, Princeton being one of them. But, I can tell you right now that the foundation of those institutions were built through slave labor. And we all know the history. So Harvard was considered one of the first universities in the United States. Now, hundreds of years later, they're saying that if you live in a low-income area, you could actually go to Harvard for free, tuition free. So it took that many hundreds of years for them to tell us that or put that in place. So yeah, colleges are very exploitive. I mean, I know mine was because it's actually built on a burial ground.
Wow.
So peace to Pavumna and all the Tongva people. who you all know as the Gabrielino Indians. There's a burial ground, Cal State Long Beach, and the people who went there, when they dug those skeletons up, they'll tell you. But now they have a mini mall over that place, so let you tell it. I want to pass it over to Jaquil in terms of college and how that relates to like it being a religious organization.
I totally see it in the sense that you give money to an institution, and like you said, there's no guarantee of any greatness other than that.
Mm-hmm.
They give you, they sell you the dream. You know what I mean? At the end, then you get the reality, and you kind of pull back the curtain on the Truman Show, and you're like, "Oh, this is all a what?" And I have to pay how much money back to these people?
Right.
Oh man, I'm in a rough situation.
So now, I think one of the things that we were talking about was the idea of the mystery God in religion, and if you really look at your university. And you think about fraternities, sororities, and you think about all these other things that are associated with religion. It all kind of fits in together,
right?
You know, so we have to begin asking ourselves: are we the ones being exploited when we go to these universities? Are we earning any type of notable rank that is leading to our success? Because one of the things that I'm doing now as an adult is I'm trying to figure out where are the corners in the market that I can go in to exploit my talent. That's completely different than being exploited as an individual.
Right.
In the name of your debts are due, your school loans are due, they might as well change financial aid. They just title it properly. Financial debt.
Right.
Just see it for what it is, man.
Right, because it's not aid.
Right.
It's not aid.
True indeed. So bringing that point home, I just wanted us to go ahead and take a little break, and we're gonna come back at you with way more heat. We just started, y'all. Peace.
Peace.
Peace and welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jaquil Allah.
Peace, Jarulullah.
And before we left, we talked a little bit about how religious institutions, organizations are exploiting the community and you out there as an individual. we're asking you to study a little bit more about what you deal with on a regular basis. So this segment of the show is about predestination, heaven, and the afterlife, and that concept and how it's being used to exploit people. And I wanted to hand it over to Jaquil to share a quote to kick off this segment. Peace.
Indeed, peace. So this is from Desmond Tutu, and it says, quote, "When missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. They said, 'Let us pray.' We closed our eyes. When we opened our eyes, we had the Bible and they had all the land."
So there you go. Let's just kind of pass that around. Like, how is that relevant in 2013? Because some people say, well, that stuff happened a long time ago. Like, how is that still happening today, where we close our eyes to pray and everything that's valuable around us is slowly being taken away? How you see that?
To me, it's just symbolic. You closing your eyes simply means you're not paying attention, or you're not dealing with reality, or truth, for that matter. So, if you're not dealing with truth, then anybody can tell you and sell you any type of lie. So it makes me think of certain things going on with the Syria situation, right? So the media is basically saying, that Syria has all these chemical weapons and there's all these types of things being pushed on us as far as trying to make us get behind it, when the truth of the matter is, based on what Jaquil already revealed, is, if they had chemical weapons, they probably would have already used them. If not, we would have already been there, you know what I mean? So it's basically, when you have something that deals with belief, which means you never have to prove it, then you can always get over on people. If you can make someone believe it, you can always get over on them.
Right.
True indeed. And, we always like to take y'all back. Check out our show in the month of February, the Knowledge God Show, where we go a little bit deeper into belief and faith in God and things of that nature. How you see it, God? I know you wanted to add on.
Yeah, no, that's a deep quote. When you, like you said, when they closed their eyes to pray, they opened their eyes and everything that they had of value was gone, and they had the damn book in their hand. And then, like you said, I think part of it is a lot of times, and we may get into that deep into the show, but a lot of times, once you get duped, you don't really want to admit that you got duped, right? So you're like, okay, well, now that we got the Bible, the Bible is the best thing, and we got to definitely push that, because when people realize that we lost all this land for this damn book, then we're really upset. So let's kind of just keep that going. And that happens, anytime people get scammed and they, you feel some kind of way about it.
Yeah. You think about it, you start believing in the book, then the person who gave you the book can tell you anything, and you'll believe that too. Right. They could tell you that this land is not of value. The land that is of value is the land that you'll see when you die.
Right.
Right. And it's supposedly going to come out of the sky.
Right.
If you read the Bible, I think that's in the book of more than likely it's in Malachi, where there's this image of Zion, or the new heaven, the new earth coming out of the sky, and things of that nature, which is it's very interesting symbolically. However, for those of us who give into our logic and our common sense, and it takes many years. Again, I came into the knowledge of myself very late in life. Some people would argue in our culture that I did not come into this late in life, but in terms of dog years, I guess it would be considered late in life. But one of the things that I wanted to add on is that, for those of you who advocate faith and things of that nature in something that you can't see, touch, taste, or smell, I would challenge you to take this into consideration. I've seen a whole bunch of bumper stickers out there, one which always catches my attention, that God is my co-pilot. Okay, so to begin with, you say you believe in God, something other than yourself, or a mystery that's going to guide your life and protect you and do all these other wonderful things for you while you sit there and pray with your eyes closed. So I want to show you how important logic is in figuring out your own world and teaching yourself. So if you say that God is your co-pilot, and you have that on your car, of course, this is not a good idea. I'm not telling you to do this, but I'm asking you to use logic. And you guys know what I'm about to say. When you jump into your car tomorrow, Monday morning, and you jump on the freeway, I would like you to close your eyes while you're driving 60 or 70 miles an hour down the freeway.
Wait. You have to say, you cannot be on the 405 to get this way because you won't be able to get to 40.
Yeah, you ain't moving that fast. So any freeway except for the 5 and the 405, okay? You jump on that freeway and you can jump on the freeway and drive your car to about 60 miles an hour. Close your eyes, take your hands off the wheel and the gas pedal. I want to see how it turns out because God is your co-pilot. Now, of course, many of you are going to say, well, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. That's common sense. That's logic. However, you don't go beyond that idea and take it a little bit further and study. Right. So I know, we've advocated on this show several times that the religions that you're a part of, the organized religion you're a part of, there are so many things that have predated these things that you advocate as being real and is for everyone. With that being said, there's an interesting number of statistics that you can find online. I found something through ABC News, and it's called the Belief Net Poll. And I just wanted to give you all some numbers before we roll into this idea of the afterlife and heaven and hell, so that you can understand the numbers in regards to how many people believe in some of the things that we're going to talk about. To begin with, it says that according to this report, or this poll, that 83% of Americans identify themselves as Christians. Think about the anti-Islam or Muslim sentiment that is prevalent in the United States today.
Right. And how they always push that they're killing Christians over there.
Right.
As if those are the only people who are dying.
Right. It says that so I wanted to go back. It says 13% have no religion. This is the United States, which leaves about 4% as adherents of all non-Christian religions combined. That being Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, and a smattering of individual mentions. I don't know what that smattering of individual mentions would
maybe
be.
like Baha'i faith or something like that.
Baha'i faith.
Something that not no one knows about, but it's not necessarily widely known.
Interesting.
Like that, but it's just like it's a small group of people. I would just throw it in with these.
Now, let's. I want to hit these two statistics. It's important. It says that Baptists are especially prevalent, to use their words. It says nearly half of blacks, 48%, say they're Baptists. All right. 15% of blacks say that they are Methodists. We're talking about people of African descent. And among whites, 22% are Catholics, and another 22% are non-affiliated Protestants, and 13% are Baptists. So I want to ask my brothers, who makes up the largest percentage of people outside of whites, because this is what the statistics say, that are poor in the United States?
Who makes up the largest percent?
Yeah, outside of whites.
I guess that would be blacks. That's a tough question.
So if almost half of our people are Baptists and a large percentage of us are poor in the United States, how is your religion helping you get out of what would be considered poverty status in the United States?
Right.
What's up with that?
Right, that's a great question.
Now, another thing that I wanted to throw into the cipher is that it says, according to the Hispanic churches in American public life, this is a national survey, it says that 70% of Latinos are Catholic, translating into 29 million Catholic Latinos in the United States. Okay, that's an extraordinary amount of people who are considered Catholics. Now, I know I wanted Jerul, you wanted to add on in terms of exactly how much can we say the Catholics are making as a religious institution in the world?
can't really speak to that. I just know that a point that stood out to me statistically was that, when you look at the amount of churches, and just this is just LA, the amount of churches versus schools is a very telling, very telling statistic. So, based on the research that we did, there are 1,963 churches. In
how many churches?
1,963 churches.
63. Okay.
And only 658 schools in LAUSD
Wow.
school district. So
wow, didn't even break 1,000 mark.
right. So I mean that's a very telling sign.
Wow.
If you could teach someone to believe versus teaching people
basic skills
that they need to survive.
That they can use in life. Right. You can't teach them arithmetic, but you can teach them to believe in the mystery God and donate the money.
Right. Basically teaching them to, suffer. Really what it is. Because think about it, people will continue to live in a harsh condition because they think that some mystery God eventually is going to save them or take them out of that condition. So they continue to suffer.
Well, those people who are doing bad things will get it in the end.
Right.
When they die and they go to meet the Maker.
Right.
But right now they're going to continue to rape and pillage you.
Right.
And take everything from you. But when they die and they have no need for all those things that you actually needed to survive, they're going to get theirs.
Right. So one of the things that we came across in our research, aside from the 1.2 billion Catholics worldwide, one source says that the United States Catholic Church makes an estimated $170 billion. I'm assuming this would be annually.
170
billion.
Wow. Billion with the B.
With a B.
Okay.
And that is excluding the business that's done outside of the United States by the Catholic Church.
Right.
Here's something interesting also that we wanted to share with you. The 3 countries in the world that claim the most Catholics, you're not going to believe this. In the United States, Catholics, like we just said, there's about 246,780,000 people that are considered Catholics in the United States, according to the statistic. In Brazil, it's about 175,770,000. That makes up about 90.2% of the population in Brazil. And the mighty Mexico, 95% of the population of people that live in Mexico are Catholic, at an estimated 107,780,000 people.
Wow.
So, I mean, when you look at the state of poverty, especially in Mexico and in Brazil, again, it just doesn't add up. How is faith in religion and these religious organizations and denominations, how is that benefiting the people?
Well, as far as Catholicism goes, you can look at the a quote given by the 6th Pope that basically says this myth of Jesus has served us very well. I mean, you talk about them making $170 billion. That myth of Jesus has served them $170 billion well.
Right.
And then, based on what you just said, countries are very poor or considered third world that you find the most Catholics in.
Right.
So,
right. It's almost the more that you take from them, the more religion you can give them to kind of buffer or make up the difference in what you're taking.
Right. So now, in saying that, we talked about the money, right? Because some people are living their heaven on earth by exploiting people who believe in these different things in churches and mosques and all these other places that are misusing funds.
What did Jesus say? The earth is already a space.
You know what I'm saying? So, in saying that, why don't we have a discussion briefly about the idea of heaven and hell as it pertains to these different denominations, namely the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I know we were briefly going to talk about the Buddhists and, our whole take on heaven and hell. So Jerome, did you want to kick it off in terms of, what's heaven and hell and the afterlife, and how do all these things relate in terms of exploiting people in religious organizations?
Well, when you think about religious organizations and how they use heaven and hell, it's simply a situation that if you can make someone believe that there's a place greater than the place that they're living in that they'll see when they die,
Mm-hmm.
then that person will do just about anything for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're the one that's the bridge to that world, right? So that's basically something that's been used for thousands of years and still used in this day and time, that keep people in a docile state and really keep people from reaching their highest level of knowing their power.
No doubt. Keeps them at that worker bee level.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's deep. When you said you can convince someone that there's something greater than they get after they die, they do anything for you. And I would say the Catholics really have it on lock, because they were like, if you don't do so great of a job, there's this other place that you can go to that's not quite hell. Right? And from there, hopefully you work your way up. Other people can pray for you. And then, maybe you can get to that heaven afterwards. So it's like the, if you don't quite make it to the NBA, you can go to the, what's the other league?
D-League.
Yeah, you can go to the D-League, right? And maybe if you work hard in the D-League, you can become an NBA player.
Right, because that's like one of those situations where you realize, like, okay, certain people keep failing as it relates to what the church wants.
Right.
So eventually people are going to just give up. So
Instead of failing.
Exactly. Right. So to keep from getting these people to give up, they'll say, okay, well, you can kind of be bad and you'll just go here. And then you can just improve your situation there, and then you'll go to heaven. You know what I mean?
Come through, get a little more Hail Marys in.
Right.
Drink a little more holy water. You'll be good.
Oh, if you want, you can pray for your uncle. I know he never really believed, but if you pay enough money, and I say these prayers enough time, it's possible that he can leave this purgatory and go into heaven. Yeah, just how much are you willing to pay for that?
Right. So and that's definitely something that's so. So I know that at least let's begin with this idea of heaven and hell. So. The Jehovah's Witnesses, which is really interesting, and this would be, again, like the God Jakil said, is you take the best part from everything, because that's what we do. We know we can learn from everyone, and sometimes we learn what not to do. So that's also taking the best part from things. One of the things that the Jehovah's Witnesses advocate is that there is no afterlife. Okay, that would be the main thing. In terms of the whole philosophy behind heaven and hell, that's not something that's advocated to their membership, which is really interesting. However, they do strive to gain some sense of salvation while they are alive, which is freedom. Okay, so if you just go one step further and look deeper within yourself, you're going to see what that freedom is. So I just wanted to read this because this was off of one of their websites. It says that witnesses, we're talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, believe that hell does not exist. There is no place where sinners are tormented after death, since their existence is over. Nothing can be done to them or for them. Witnesses also argue that it would be completely against God's nature to torture humans for eternity. It says that, however, death is not the end of everything. Each person can be remembered by God and eventually be resurrected. Okay, and that's the part of it where we kind of dive into this deep black hole, resurrection. So you're not going to be resurrected, okay? You will not be able to stand straight up, right, until you die.
That's interesting.
So my question would be, where are you going to get the body from to do that? That would be my first question after you die. Where are you going to get the body from?
eBay?
So I wanted to ask y'all, in terms of death, how is that being sold to people in religious organizations? Like this idea of death, how is that being used to control people?
I'll take it. I say a big part of it is fear, right? And so, again, when when people don't wisdom the culture, you got the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
right? So most people are afraid of what they don't know. And so if you give people, instead of giving them the truth about it, right, which will calm them and put them at ease about it, you sell them this fairy tale story about it, which will also calm them, but then allow you to also take advantage of that person, right? Because like now you're selling them the dream. I got the swampland in Arizona.
That's real. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I said.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how I draw it up. It's like, you know, one of the most fearful things for people is to think that they'll cease to exist,
Right.
you know, physically. So that's a hard pill for anyone to swallow. So that's me knowing that if I'm an individual who is trying to exploit a person, I could say, well, you know, this book says this. So if you get closer to me and my teachings, then you'll be able to go to this place where you'll have eternal life.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
and not to mention everyone else's teachings are wrong.
Right.
It's only mine that are right.
Right, and I mean, again, we're talking about arguing about this paranormal or unknown world with a book that has been predated
Right.
by civilizations that were far greater than those of which have been built by Christian organizations, so to speak.
Right.
I mean, you know, and that's the funny thing. I wanted to share this this quote from the Venerable. It says Venerable K. Sri Damananda Mahatma of Sri Lanka. That was a really hard name.
You did well with that, Chief.
Yeah.
Forgive me, Buddhists in Sri Lanka. Eventually, this particular gentleman went and eventually taught in Malaysia. So hopefully you can gain something, you know, enlightening from this particular view. He says that the Buddha's teaching shows us that there are heavens and hells not only beyond this world, but in this very world itself. Thus, the Buddhist conception of heaven and hell is very reasonable. For instance, the Buddha once said, quote, "When the average ignorant person makes an assertion to the effect that there is a hell, patala, under the ocean, he is making a statement which is false and without basis. The word hell is a term for painful sensations. The idea of one particular ready-made place or a place created by God as heaven and hell is not acceptable to the Buddhist concept." So, you know, it goes back into what we're saying is that, you know, you are very capable of making your heaven or your hell. It all depends on your, it all depends on where you're putting your energies into. I think one of the things that I think of when I think of like discussions about organized religion is I think about the relationship between a pimp and a prostitute. And you have to begin to ask yourself, you know, are you the one being pimped? So what does a pimp do? I've made this analogy before on this show. It's just unbelievable how it comes full circle. All right, but we know 15 is cipher, so it's all going to come full circle,
Right.
no doubt about it. But when you give your money to the pimp, I mean to the minister, and you go out and you work your job, and then you come back the next week, and it's the week that you got paid, and you give more of your money to the minister. And then you do it again, and you do it again, and you've done it for like 25 years. You have yet to ask yourself exactly how much money you've given to that minister.
Right.
And quite frankly, you have to ask yourself, is the church going to pay for your funeral? I wonder how many churches save up money from their congregation to bury the members of their congregation for free.
Right.
Because getting buried costs a whole bunch of money.
It sure does.
You know what I'm saying? In the thousands of dollars. So, you know, you have to begin to ask yourself, all that money that your grandfather gave to that church that he served in, they can't give one red penny towards burying your grandfather who served that church for 30, 40 years before they deceased. The only thing they're willing to do is to give you the space for your casket and the minister to give you that free of charge, of course.
Right.
But everything else, the family pays for.
Right.
You know.
Flowers and all that.
True indeed. So is that hell or is that heaven? You know?
Right.
I would say the person who passed is experiencing a type of heaven because he doesn't have to deal with, or she doesn't have to deal with the BS, right?
Right.
As far as the family who's left behind is definitely in the hell because now they gotta figure out how to come up with all this money, which they probably weren't preparing for, and it's not like we're in plentiful times right now in America, right? So. It's definitely a hell or a hell type situation for the people who are involved who need to figure out how they're going to bury this person.
True indeed.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to build on it relates to what you just read when it says the Buddhist concept. Let's be real when we deal with Buddhism. Buddhism wasn't necessarily intended to be like a religion. The Buddha never said follow me.
Right.
He said find your own path. This is what worked for me, so you can practice this, but if it doesn't work for you, find your own way. But the Buddhist concept means simply the enlightened concept. So enlightened to me just simply means dealing with the light that exists within you.
Enlightened,
right? So you have to bring that light to the surface.
Right.
You can't keep ignoring it because that's when others capitalize on that light and they use that light for their own purpose. So
true indeed.
He keeps them blind to himself so he can use them as a tool.
Exactly. So with that being said, why don't we take a brief break and we'll be coming back at you. Peace. Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Knowledge Allah.
Peace. Jarul Allah.
And before we left, we were talking a little bit more about organized religion. Not only that, exactly how many people are within different denominations, specifically Christian denominations. And also we talked a little bit about the concept of heaven, hell, and death. So I wanted to give it away to Jarul to introduce this last segment where we talk about how does all the above that we discussed lead us to give away our equality. Yeah, Jarul.
Yeah, so this quote comes from Manly P. Hall from a book that we're actually recommending to y'all to read. There's a PDF out there. It's called The Occult Anatomy of Man. The quote is, "In Scripture, we are told that God made man in His own image. It is so stated not only the Christian Bible, but also in the holy writings of nearly all enlightened people. The Jewish patriarchs taught that the human body was the microcosm or little cosmos made in the image of the macrocosms or the great cosmos.
Hmm. Man.
So that's basically sums up the reality of God in a sense. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So understanding the small and the large of our existence.
All connected, right?
Right.
You know.
And I mean, with something like that, I'm sure those of you who do some research into Manly P. Hall, quite frankly, what you're going to find is you're going to find the importance of studying everything that you attest as being truth or reality.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So we can't leave without talking a little bit about the science and philosophy behind forgiveness through a church service. So it brings to mind an interesting quote from rap artist the Fugees. I believe it was like maybe their second or third album. I can't exactly remember what it is, but I know Wyclef said that. And I'm going to paraphrase it, basically, who kills 6 days a week and rests on the Sabbath. So the idea of what I considered false belief and false faith, one of the things that churches always advocate is that no matter what we do, God is always going to forgive us.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's take this on a more of a human level. Are people justified in killing children? Absolutely not. And it's each person. It's their right to whether they believe, whether they forgive someone, they give someone mercy for intentionally killing their child or a member of their family. That's totally up to them to do.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are some people that live this life thinking that they can do all types of things, atrocities, whatever it is. And as soon as they go to church and they go into the confession booth, they're forgiven of all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But what it doesn't do is it doesn't create any type of justice. It doesn't
change
correct
or
anything.
reform in the person.
Yeah. How do y'all see that? I mean, in terms of the church advocating forgiveness of sins. I mean, how is that really changing or helping the individual or society at large?
Well, you're not dealing with truth or reality. You go there and it's basically the church is just there to make you feel better about you living uncivilized, in a sense. So it's like you do all these dirty deeds 6 days out of the week. You go to the church. Oh, we forgive you. Jesus forgives you. You feel better about yourself. You get back to the streets doing the dirty deeds again. So it's just one of those cycles,
Right. And then oftentimes it almost gives people that thought pattern that they have the free reign to do whatever because you can just go get forgiven of your sins. And as long as Jesus forgave you or,
right.
however you trace that story back, but, as long as you have that forgiveness or that means to get forgiveness, then who cares what you do because it'll all be forgiven.
Right.
True indeed. And another thing that comes to mind is The Godfather. I mean, whether people want to admit that or not, one of the hearts of that particular series of movies, you were too busy looking at all the violence in the mafia, but you failed to look at how Roman Catholicism was at the heart of all of those types of activities, because all of that stuff was governed by the church.
Yeah, the Vatican. Yeah.
Right, and when all the murders were taking place and all the international goings on was going on with that family, all of that stuff was ordained by the Catholic Church.
Right.
So it's interesting, forgiveness through the church. Now, how does this type of thinking, just to bring it around the round table, how does that make people weak and wicked, the way we see it?
The way I see it is, it makes you weak because you're not in the driver's seat per se, or you don't think you're in the driver's seat. You think that your life is really in the hands of some mystery that never been proven to exist. So you can't really acknowledge your power. You can't really truly know the ability that you have if you think something else is in control of your life or your situation.
Right.
The whole church service itself makes you wicked because now you're in a state of separation because your church or your religion is the one religion that's right and exact, and everything else, science, other churches, other religions, are fake and false. So you're almost like you remove yourself and isolate yourself from them.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that. There's this debate. I actually posted it in the Facebook group, and one of the things that the people, it was four scientists based in two different groups, and one was pro God, or the debate was, the science refute God, and so there was you had your pro and your cons, and so the people who were for it, they said. There's a lot of things that advocated. One thing he was like, well, for one, I don't have to end the laws of physics in order to support belief in a God. And I thought that was really deep. And there's another thing that he just said. I kind of lost my train of thought about that, but I posted that in the group. You guys should take a look at it. It's a very good video.
I would really like to have a discussion with anyone like that. Was he Caucasian?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's Caucasian. Deep. So I mean,
theoretical physicist. He's a deep dude.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, anyone who, first of all, if you're dealing with physics and you're dealing with the idea of mathematics in terms of the physical man and woman, if you don't advocate which people came on this planet Earth first, then everything you believe does not matter. Because until white people admit that we are the fathers and mothers of civilization, then everything else that they advocate is a lie. And we know that they're not doing it because it's not showing up in our schools in any capacity. You have to take a raggle-taggle Black Studies class to find that out. Again, there are a lot of studies out there which advocate what we're saying here, who the original people on this planet Earth was. And then we also can take it to when the white man's religion came. It came hundreds, thousands, millions of years later.
Right.
Okay. So, I'm glad you share that. Now, one of the things that Jaquil brought up is the idea of, does religion make one more moral versus science? So let's go into this idea of morality. And I wanted to just give it over to you right there. I don't need to give his brother no intro. What was it that came to mind when you added this part onto the show?
Yeah, some of it was based on that debate. Some of it, a lot of it, just life experience. A lot of people argue without religion, we wouldn't know what was right and what was wrong. And again, I argue on the side of science. A lot of people argue on the side of science that once you actually learn the proper, or have that proper understanding of that thing, proper knowledge of it, that will bring out in you a certain kind of moral obligation to be fair and deal in equality with that thing. But you're not going to want to necessarily study a breed of insect and then go out and then kill that insect, right? Because you just learned everything about it and how beautiful it is and all the great things about it, and you're not going to want to kill that. And so whereas in religion, like we talked about, you have the whole your sins can be forgiven, and so if you do want to kind of kill off half of them, who cares? You'll be forgiven and it's okay.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of clients that I deal with are religious, and I train a lot of them at parks, so we're outside in the midst of ants and other different insects. So instead of kind of positioning themselves away from these ants or other insects, they'll just stomp them and kill them and things of that nature. So it's kind of like they're always talking about Jesus this and striving to live like Jesus and this, that, and the third.
But then stomp out an ant colony.
Stomp out an ant colony.
Who cares? It's
just an ant. Right. So.
Yeah, no understanding of, like you read in that quote, the microcosm and the micro, right? Although we are the micro of that micro, macro, right? There is a smaller of us, like an ant colony.
Right.
Would be a human civilization for all intents and purposes.
True indeed. That's a deep concept there. I think always when I talk to people about morals, I talk about what's right and wrong. And the argument can always be presented that, well, if a child born into a society has seen everyone in his family sacrifice people, then he or she is going to say to themselves that that's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So what is how does everyone argue that? You know, that's an old debate. Man.
Yeah, but I wouldn't even argue is that true, right? So, and by that I mean there's a difference between what everyone does and what's right, right? So although you know that this is what your people do, you may know that also that that's not necessarily what's right. That's just what my people do. Right? Just the same thing, like you know, if you get into it, or your friend gets into some BS and you know he was wrong, you're still going to back your boy up because that's your boy at the end of the day, right? But it doesn't mean he was right. It just means that's what you're choosing to do. And so I would say let's start there. I mean, can you even show and prove that that's what happens, that people think that's right just because they do it versus building up justifications for it?
Right. You know, one thing that I was told is that, you know, every generation or every society has always had one person stand up and try to teach the rest of the society that what's going on is incorrect. It's against, or better yet, that what's going on in that society is against nature. And the thing that we'll tell you as original men is that we work really hard not to go against our nature. And our nature, to begin with, it begins with knowledge, you know, knowing who we are. So we know the things that we're not supposed to engage in. We know which things will eventually make us weak individuals, so we refrain from doing those things. You know, and that is when you're going in accordance with nature. And I know life has been really good in terms of advocating that as soon as you go against your nature, that's when things become problematic. And you have to think about what that is, you know, as a man or a woman.
And what they say in one of those Wu-Tang skits, when you go against nature, you're going against the science of yourself.
Indeed. So I think just since we're going into a close, unless anyone has any other thoughts about that. Okay. All right. Well, you know, it's been a journey, man. To begin with, why don't we go into the read? I don't know who wanted to do the read.
I'll take it. You know, so there's one book called the Black God Anthology PDF. You can get that online. Is it? So that the PDF is online for free. So that's the Black God Anthology. And then, like I mentioned earlier, The Occult Anatomy of Man by Manly P. Hall. And that PDF is also free online, so you can do the knowledge of that too.
And to view a really interesting video is called Religulous. And that's actually narrated by Bill Maher. He goes out and interviews a whole bunch of people from different faiths.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And he asks them all types of questions. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Check that out.
Yeah.
Bill, he's an interesting guy.
He is.
Yeah, I'm not too mad at him. And for the do, we got find the 5% in your area. So what that basically means is find someone who's true and living and is teaching the truth, and is going to answer you honestly, right? So if that person doesn't know the answer, they're not going to make it up to you. They're going to tell you they don't know.
Right.
So find that person and build with that person or people.
And take time with them. Make sure you examine them, get to know them, look at their way of life before you consider them the 5%, because you know you don't really know someone until you walk with them and really learn about that person, you know, on a deeper level.
Right.
So we would like to thank all of you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.